Well, welcome to our study, discussion, and exposition of Esther chapter 3. In chapter 2, or the end of chapter 2, we see Mordecai exposing the assassination attempt of King Xerxes by two of his court officials. In chapter 2, verses 21, we read that during the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were hanged on their gallows. All this was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Well, a key point to note from this passage is that Esther tells the king and gives credit to Mordecai, which is a testimony to Esther's, or a testimony of Esther's noble character. So when King Xerxes learns of this plot to eliminate him from his position, he acted quickly to squash this threat. Remember, by this time, a number of events have already taken place to make the king feel exposed and vulnerable, and his anger is almost at the top. Any minor incident will trigger him. Remember also at this time, or by this time, he has already been rejected by his queen, and a bridge he was building between Greece and Turkey is not going so well. Alexander the Great is kicking his butt on the battlefield, and his treasury is bleeding and almost depleted. And above all else, he now learns that his subjects are trying to overthrow him. You can imagine the consequences the two culprits will face from King Xerxes, especially considering his anger. You do not want to be in the bad side of King Xerxes at this time, especially when things are just not going as he intends them to be, and he's known to have temper tantrums. And so the two plotters are quickly punished, and the king, as a matter of caution, appoints a leader, a person who he grants the position of second in command to crush any other resistance that may arise in his kingdom. Well, here is where we expect Mordecai to be the person who is going to be appointed to this new position, since he unveils this plot to assassinate the king. But instead, the king picks another by the name of Haman, the Agagite, to crush the resistance and to make sure that the nobles were in submission and in good behavior. Mordecai is overlooked and Haman is given the position, but we find that Mordecai does not complain at all. He accepts the reality of this outcome, as Haman is elevated to the highest seat than all the other nobles in the land, and Mordecai continues to serve at the king's gate. So in chapter 3, verse 1, we read, after these things, King Ahasuerus, or King Xerxes, promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. Now Haman's character stands in sharp contrast to that of Mordecai. Mordecai is a humble and a man full of wisdom and self-control, a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin. But Haman, on the other hand, is an opportunist, a racist, a crafty, and a cruel man. He's full of hatred. He is the son of Hamadother, the Agathite. And Agathite was a descendant of King Agag of the Amalekites. And the Amalekites were the ancient enemies of the Jewish people since the time of King Saul. So this history is well known by Mordecai, and now he sees Haman resurrecting this ancient hatred. What is he to do? Listen to what Moses said of the Amalekites in the second law, or in the book of Deuteronomy. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you are faint and weary and cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you, and he did not fear God. The Amalekites were merciless people to the Israelites, and as they marched to the promised land, they tortured them. They attacked them from behind and picked the weak ones and the weary ones. They picked on the women and the children and those who were lame. After the attack, Yahweh instructs Moses on the following. This is what he says. Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies around you, in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. End of verse 19. The Lord is reminding the Israelites not to forget getting rid of these terrible guys. Well, he's a descendant of Amalek by the name of Haman, a descendant of the original anti-Semitic race on the planet Earth. Mordecai remembers his Jewish history, especially after seeing what Haman is doing to the Persians. He's saying, now the Persians? He is demanding that they, along with the Hebrew people, they are all alike, that they are to bow down to him and to worship him. And Mordecai becomes very angry and agitated as he remembers what the Amalekites did to his people. All of a sudden, he remembers who he is. And he therefore resolves in his heart and in his mind that he will not bow down to worship Haman, no matter what. Now, the antagonist of this story, who is Haman, of course, gets extremely mad by Mordecai's resolve, and he begins to think, begins to kind of craft an idea. And while he is thinking, the other officials and nobles are also wondering, why is it that Mordecai is not obeying the order of the king and the order of Haman? And verse 3 of chapter 3, we read, then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's command? Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated. For he had told them he was a Jew. Boom! This is the climax of the story. The tables are overturned all of a sudden, and everybody is stunned by Mordecai's revelation. And they say to him, we thought you were Persian. All this time, they say to him. Mordecai had said to himself, enough is enough. You know when you get there, don't you? Mordecai reveals his identity and tells them that he's a Jew, a son of Abraham indeed. First, let's think about the etymology of Mordecai's name as it's derived from the Babylonian god named Marduk, which means warrior. It's kind of interesting to find a Jew who was the name of a Babylonian god. But remember, Mordecai was, by this time, 3 generations removed from his ancestors. He had gotten accustomed to the passions ways of life, but now he remembers his identity after this agitation by Haman. When the robber meets the road for Mordecai, he remembers of his heritage. Haman's name, on the other hand, means wrath in Hebrew, and we find that for sure he lived his name. Mordecai had resolved that he would not bow, and he seemed prepared to face the crisis that will come with his refusal to bow down. The era of compromise is coming to an end for Mordecai. He sees the injustice and he says, enough is enough. In fact, the word used in this text to express Mordecai's resolve is in the perfect future tense, giving the implication that Mordecai, for sure, he decided in his heart and in his mind never to change his resolve in spite of despite the consequences or the reactions of Haman. His name is Mordecai, and he has resolved. Haman, on the other hand, decides to develop a plot to eliminate this man and all of his people. He says, I'm not going to get rid of Mordecai alone. I'm going to get him with everybody else who's related to him. Mordecai's revelation will have consequences. So, verse 5, we read, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. By this time that Haman is plotting his extermination plan, Esther, the queen, has been on the throne for about 5 years. It is the year 474 BC, which is also the 12th year of King Xerxes' rule. Haman is plotting to destroy Mordecai together with his people during the month of Nisan, which was the first month of the year of 474 BC. Haman's strategy will employ a plan that is intended to blindside the king so that he does not know whether he has an ulterior motive behind this plan. And so in the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, or the poor, that is, a lot is cast in the presence of Xerxes to select a day and a month when he would execute this plan. And the lot fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Haman, in the presence of King Xerxes, selects the 12th month of Adar, and then he says this to the king in verse 8. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury. End of quote. Haman manipulates the king and uses the fear factor to intimidate the king by issuing a report that's not correct. He says he has people in his provinces that are not obeying the king. Well, he has no evidence, but he scares the king enough with this group of people, which, by the way, he does not identify at this particular point. He leaves this detail that these people are the Jews. He leaves a detail out in his accusation and says that these people do not obey the king. Haman knows for sure, and for sure he knows that the king likes to be stroked. He likes his pride to be seen and to be stroked. He knows how the king deals with disobedience as well. He knows that laws are written to eliminate those people that do not obey them. Remember Vashti, his own queen. Haman knows this, and therefore he incites the king and wants his anger to rise to the roof. He tells the king that this disobedience is not in his best interest. King, do something about this looming danger in your kingdom. He appeals to him. Therefore, he wants to act. Haman wants to act as if he's not involved in the plot at all by saying this. It says, if it pleases the king, King, I have told you, you make the decision. You are the one with the power. It's not me, it's you, the king. Do something about these disobedient people. Issue a decree to destroy these people because they are not obeying you. To make the matters worse, listen to the next statement that Haman urges out of his mind or out of his mouth. This is what he says. He's trying to bribe the king. Haman says this. He knows that the king's treasury is bleeding since the war with Alexander is not going well. He has been spending like crazy since the last banquet that lasted 6 months. He is in the process of building a bridge that is so expensive between Turkey and Greece. And Haman knows cash is running tight. And so knowing all this, Haman says to the king, if you issue the decree and destroy these people, I will issue 3/4. I will surrender 3/4 of my yearly salary to your treasury, O king. Haman offers the king 3/4 of his yearly income to execute this plan, and he reminds him that his treasury is bleeding heavily. 10,000 talents was equivalent to about 3/4 of his yearly salary. Will the king fall for this trick? Will the king fall to King Haman's plan? Or rather to Haman's plan. So the king tells Haman, keep your money, which of course pleases him that he doesn't have to part with his wealth. But Xerxes authorizes Haman to seal and execute the order to destroy and to kill and alienate the Jews, and then have the people be rewarded or to reward themselves with their property. Haman says, I get to keep my money, but still accomplish what I want to accomplish. So the king here, we find he's more concerned with his ego and his pride. He wants to save face. He wants to show that he is to be feared more than he wants Haman's money. So the king orders Haman to execute the order to destroy all men and all women, young and old, boys and girls, on a single day, the 13th day of the month, 12th month of Adar. This is important to note because the edict is being written on the first month of the year, but the execution will take place after 12 months at the end of the year, or rather the beginning of the next year, which would be 473 BC. Can you imagine the fear of the Jews as they face this danger that's coming ahead in 12 months' time? A year full of anxiety, knowing that the end is near. Also note that the edict was delivered to the masses on the 13th day of Nisan, which would have been 1 day prior to the celebration of the Passover feast, which began on the 14th day of the month of Nisan. Haman is nothing more than a cruel, nasty, manipulative, vindictive and anti-racist guy. But remember, God is in control, even in this chaos. Will the Jews have hope in God, or will they sink in fear? How will they handle this crucible moment in their life at this moment? Will they choose to wait on his promises, or will they remember the words of Psalm number 46 when he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." As you walk with the Lord, there will be difficult moments ahead. Will you choose to continue staring at injustice, or will you act? Will you compromise and stay hidden and stay underground, or will you remain true to your Lord? Will your true allegiance be revealed? Mordecai resolved in his heart not to bow down and to worship Haman, no matter the consequences. Will you succumb to fear, or will you be faithful? These are the words of encouragement for us from the Lord himself. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. Be patient in your affliction, because God can be trusted. After Haman's wicked plan, we read the following. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality. Remember, he's in charge of 127 provinces, stretching from India, Pakistan, all the way to Sudan and to Ethiopia. So these people are to read this edict from the king in every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. The couriers, or the letter carriers, went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. After this, the king and Haman sat down to drink. They sat down to celebrate Haman. But the city of Susa was bewildered. Another translation reads, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. What will happen next? Will Mordecai and his people be eliminated? What will happen to Esther? Join me next time, or during our next study, as we explore this story of Mordecai and Esther, and the response to Haman and the king's threat to destroy them together with their families and their tribes and their kinfolk. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel so that you may be notified when the next teaching from chapter 4 of Esther is published. I think chapter 4 will be interesting, because we'll see Esther's response. And we'll see, first of all, Mordecai sending this edict to Esther. What will Esther do? This is going to be the most interesting chapter here, chapter 4 of Esther. May God bless you, and thank you for being with me. We all wish you Lord's blessings. Talk to you and see you next time. Thanks.